Hey everyone, welcome to GVN Interviews. My name is Mike Vaughn, and today I am really excited to talk to Tim Bartell. He is the star of one of my all-time favorite 80s cult films, and that is Society. You can see that it's disappearing a little bit. Yeah, gosh, how did you get involved with this movie?
Well, I was an actor in the 80s, and my agent sent me out for it and stuff. I didn't know very much about it when I went in to read for it. I hadn't seen, I guess, Brian Yesna had already produced Reanimator, but I hadn't seen Reanimator at that point yet. So I thought it's like, oh, it's about a bunch of kids in Beverly Hills, and something scary happens. Okay, that's no big deal. I got the first clue that there might be something much more intense to this when I remember at one point I was talking with somebody on the audition, and a PA was walking the other direction. This is a guy named Andrew who I'd eventually become friends with, but he's walking the other direction, and I'm saying, like, yeah, I hear something with my character David Blanchard. There's some kind of sacrifice or something like that, and he kind of went like that, and that was like my first indication that maybe there was more to this little horror film than I anticipated.
Nice. So yeah, I guess, jumping right into like the most famous scene of the movie, you're kind of well, as my background alludes to, it's like the centerpiece of this goopy masterpiece is the shunting, of course. Before we jump into actually like filming the scene, what was your first impressions of like reading that on the script?
I was concerned. I got to be honest. I think if maybe I had seen Reanimator, I might have realized that Brian, even though again he was a producer on that, not the director, but still that he brings a touch of humor to some of the stuff he does, and maybe I would have been a little calmer. But again, I'm thinking like, when I heard the word sacrifice, I'm thinking David Blanchard like lays down his life and helps a bunch of people and stuff like that. I didn't know it was more like human sacrifice, like in the Aztec kind of sensibility of
Yeah.
sacrifice. So I'm like reading on the script, and again, you've seen the movie, so it's kind of standard horror suspense for a long time. Little freaky little visions occasionally from Billy, seeing things or wondering what's going on, but just little hints until you get to the shunting. It's not that different from say another horror film of the era. And then so I'm reading along and I get to the shunting, and my eyes are kind of growing wider, and I'm starting to get I noticed my heart rate is going up a little bit, and I got into my car and drove to my agent. I could have just called them, but I actually felt like I need to have a face-to-face meeting on this. Drove to my agent, set the script down, and said, there's a lot of people licking and touching my body in this. I'm not usually what I do as an actor, and I was a little concerned. He encouraged me, and I knew I needed, and besides it was a pretty good sized part for someone like me, it would be a little bit of money. I thought, I had no idea this was going to be like a cult classic or anything like that. At the time I was just like, okay, how am I going to play this? And I remember seeing I think it was Gorillas in the Mist came out around that time with Sigourney Weaver. And I remember seeing it in the theater, and there was some very highly charged emotional scene. And I remember watching that and going, okay, that's how I'm going to play the shunting. I'm going to really play this like I'm just being raped and killed simultaneously, now I had my motivation, so now I was prepared. But initial reading of it, I was a little frightened. Yeah.
Yeah. You're like, shit, what did I get myself into?
Yeah, yeah, and the nice part is when you are a little worried about something, and then you actually go to do it, and it actually not only meets all your worries, but actually goes beyond that. I mean, because it really was very difficult to do, and so it makes you feel like all that worry didn't go for nothing. Like, yeah, that was something to be concerned about.
Walk me through when you actually filmed again, the famous shunting scene. Like how, I mean, it must have been just labor intensive to just get into that, like was like a full body suit, I guess, that they had you sort of meshed in with all these other, or how
Well,
did that?
yeah, there's different parts of the scene. So like when they first, so I'm brought in masked. I mean, there isn't probably not very much doubt in the audience's mind as to who's being brought in, but they did, the audience thought to that point that I had died earlier in the story. But that was all fake, so they could keep me alive to do the shunting. So I'm brought in, and the mask is off. And then when they start to go at me, they pull the real me onto this couch, and they start pulling apart my hospital gown that I'm in, and that's all really me. So early stuff of like them licking and grabbing onto me and stuff, that's me. And then eventually they basically what they did was cut out a hole in the back of the couch. I mean, this is very, this is not high budget, CGI. This is before that kind of stuff. So it was literally they had made a body cast of me and a head cast, which I should just mention quickly. The body cast was very easy. I was just basically standing in underwear, and they took lots of this gooey stuff and started plaster kind of stuff and started putting on me to harden and then take off. The head piece, because eventually my head is like ripped apart. The head piece, that's really an act of faith to have a head cast made for yourself. They basically said, okay, we're going to put these two little straws in your nose. And then we're going to start putting the plaster all over your head, and you just keep on giving us a sign that you can hear us and you're breathing, okay? So that was a little tricky, but eventually they've got this thing made. So then what they did was I crouched down inside the couch, the part that had been cut out, and they connected the prosthetic to my body like this, and then if you see some of the scenes where I'm being shunted and stuff like that, you'll see people's hands are like around my neck like this, which looks like they're kind of holding me in place and choking me. Well, it was also a device to make sure that the seams between the thing and me were covered up. So it's kind of like this. And that's how we got the effect of the body that was gyrating and being shunted and stuff like that.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible.
There were a lot of things going on. I mean, I can tell you a few things that still stand out in my memory. I mean, so again, like I mentioned earlier, I decided that I'm really going to play this big. I'm just going to like really go for it. And so I'm basically every take screaming and crying and begging for my life, and just and everyone around me is like growling at me, going, ah! And it's really freakier than you think. I mean, you try to tell, oh, this is just acting, I'm just pretending to scream, nothing, there's no danger here, but it gets into your head when everybody around you is screaming and growling at you, and you're begging and crying. And there were a couple little things that stand out that were like, I remember a female extra who was attached to my body as one of the shunters. The mouths kind of come out to feed off of the poor or the outsiders. I'm the outsider in society because my character is Jewish. And I remember between takes, she was kind of resting her hand on my right nipple, which gave me the impression that maybe she kind of liked me a little bit. And had I actually been at a different place, not actually in the middle of being shunted,
Yeah.
and crying and screaming and trying to keep terrible thoughts in my head so I could keep on crying and screaming, I might have said, hey, let's have dinner later. And it didn't, at the moment, it probably would have been a bad idea anyway, but she seemed. But the other thing I remember during the midst of all this screaming and crying was one of the PAs, a different guy that I mentioned before. We had been talking on the set, and I like horror, I like all kinds of different things, but I'm also a fan of like real classic cinema, foreign language, like Fellini and Bergman, stuff like that. And this guy just thought it was hysterical that here was this guy who's going to be shunted in a horror film, who was a big fan of like art house stuff like Fellini and Bergman. So I'd be screaming and cut, and then he'd like, well, people are still attached to me and stuff. He'd come and lean into me and say, Tim, Fellini called. He's very proud of you. And then it's like action. Okay, screaming, yell again. And you lean in between takes again and go, Bergman called. He wants to work with you, Tim. So that I kind of remember. Remember. And losing my voice from screaming all day, I remember that pretty well too.
Wow. Yeah, I mean that's really interesting when you say that it like you're just acting, of course, but when you get so much into that mindset and then you have all this kind of weirdness around you, I mean that's gotta probably I don't know. That's got to be beyond surreal, I would think.
It was actually kind of disturbing. I mean, I didn't fully appreciate what was going on right in the moment. I know that when we finally took a break, and again, I had been crouching in this very uncomfortable position. So when I got out and my legs kind of were able to, they were helping me out, my legs kind of touched on the ground. I actually started to tear up a little bit. I was actually getting a little emotional, and I was in a little bit of pain. So I thought, oh yeah, I'm just getting emotional because my legs hurt and stuff. And they took me over, to the side, and the makeup people were like massaging my legs and stuff. And this older gentleman who was one of the extras, in the shunting, came over and said, "It's really hard what you're doing right now." And I was like, "Yeah, it is." And that was like, I kind of gave myself, or maybe had the first awareness that it was more than just my legs hurting, stuff like that. That maybe part of why I was getting kind of emotional, a little teary, was because I was freaked out. It was like a really intense experience. It was. They've done studies, and they say like acting next to actually going through something in life, whatever, laughing, crying, murder, whatever thing you go through in life, the only thing that's going to be more real is acting, because you have to conjure up all the same emotions as if you trick your body into that you're actually going through it. So yeah, it was a really I wouldn't do it again. I wouldn't. I did it. I'm glad I did it. It turned out it's the best, the best thing I did in the film. But I would not want to experience it again.
Yeah. No, that's your performance is great. It definitely is very disturbing, as you say, to watch it, because I mean, yeah, you really do sell that moment so well. It's really interesting. I like so like I said, this is one of my favorite 80s films. And over the years, I kind of found that this movie is maybe even more relevant today than it was back in the 80s. What do you think?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think it's really taken on a new life. I mean, at the time the film came out, it was, it was finished, and we had the first screening in 1989, but it wasn't released in the United States. It was first released in Japan, and then the UK, and I think it got released in the United States in maybe 91 or early 92, something around there. I know I saw it for the second time on VHS in 1992. And that it's just coming out. Yeah. And for years I thought after that, well, it's just kind of, it's a little horror film. It's kind of been forgotten and stuff. And then in the 2000s, I remember I direct now, and I was directing somebody, I was interviewing a producer for a short film. He goes, "Oh my God, you were David Blanchard in Society." And that was like the first hint to me that maybe a little cult audience had been growing. And now, over the course of time, I mean, a film that was originally intended as kind of a commentary on the Reagan Bush era has now become a commentary on where we're at now, with, the 99%, Bernie Sanders, the idea of the rich and powerful kind of as a, kind of cabal that's controlling the world, but they're actually these strange, different breed of creatures and stuff like that. I think that resonates more now, and there's still a lot of people. I get people, messaging me on Facebook or Instagram or stuff like that are just discovering the film. Somebody messaged me the other day and showed me that Patton Oswalt had just seen the film for the first time, and he was posting about it.
Wow!
So it's like, yeah, it's really kind of cool that it grew over the course of time as opposed to diminishing.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because it was a movie that I discovered like through Anchor Bay. Gosh, do you remember Anchor Bay back in the 90s?
Yeah, yeah, I do.
And then, of course, Blu-ray, and then this deluxe beast. I mean, that's pretty gorgeous. You can kind of see
that's the 25th anniversary one, right?
Yeah. And it's interesting because I've got to talk to Brian Usna a few times. He's quite a character. Have you and him kept up? Do you stay in touch with him or any of the other Society crew?
We didn't for a long time. I mean, Brian brought me in to read for something after that, but I didn't get the part for the Bride of Reanimator. There was a small part that I didn't get it, unfortunately. But for a long time I didn't see him, and then they had a 30th anniversary screening at the American Cinematheque Society, and Brian and I and one other cast member were there for the Q&A afterwards and stuff. So that's the first time I saw him in a long time. It was great to see him again. And he even mentioned trying to shop a society series idea and stuff like that, which
okay.
Very, very interesting. I mean, when my character dies, so I don't think I'd have much of a, unless it was a cameo, as like, oh look, there's the guy who played Blanchard, But and I've occasionally run into, like on Facebook or something like that, some other cast members and stuff. But you know the nature of filmmaking. It's kind of like a summer camp. You all come together and you become very close as you're doing all this stuff, and then you break up and summer camp ends and you all go off. So it's been fun to kind of run into some of these people again after decades.
Like, speaking of Brian Usna, do you recall like some like did he give you a lot of really good input for your character? Or I know you were saying about how you kind of had an idea of like how you wanted to play Blanchard. So like
the only thing that sticks out, I mean, I'm sure he did, it's been a long time. As far as like a lot of specifics, I don't remember. The thing that comes back to me most now is because, now, again, I direct, so I know the experience of like when you're a director, you want to get everything you can out of something. And I'm like, again, when doing the shunting, I just remember screaming and screaming and screaming. And, my voice is getting worse and worse. And at one point, we weren't rolling audio. And Brian was like, scream, Tim, it motivates the extras. Like, ah! Wow. I could have motioned Brian over and said, I think I got one scream left. So I do remember that, but I'm not saying that badly about Brian. He was getting what he needed to make it work. And I understand that, but I can't think of anything else that was like really, I mean, he was more like, he'd let us, go things and then he'd adjust, he'd like say, okay, you're doing that, like try it like this, or, stuff like that. I don't remember like a long conversation about the, inner workings of Blanchard or anything like that. I think he was kind of confident it was right there in the script,
You mentioned you direct now. So I would love to hear more about that, your upcoming projects, and kind of like how you like have taken some of these like roles and then sort of like now you're on the other side of things, like how that's kind of informed how you are as a director.
Sure. Well, as at first, I mean, I would say that it's been definitely a different experience. I'm a writer director, and when I do a project, to watch actors come in and audition and see the ones that really stand out. Tons of terrific actors might be do a solid job, a solid reading and stuff like that. There's usually something really interesting that one or two people do to make them stand out and get the callback or actually get the part. An interesting choice they make, or something where they just embody the role so much more. They bring it to life in a way that no one else does. I don't know how you codify that. I think though, if I were acting now, I'd be a better actor having been a director and seeing how people, what ways they find to shine in an audition or on the set, and stuff like that. I write. I don't do horror. I like horror, but the first feature film I did was just a few years ago. It was called Dirty Beautiful, and it's a dysfunctional love story would be the way to say it. And when you say love story, I got to throw dysfunctional in there, because when you say love story, you're starting to think like Hallmark Channel and kind of cutesy. It's like, this is not cutesy. This is a very lonely guy who meets a woman who's recently has no place to live, and she leaves her previous lover at a stoplight and jumps into his car and convinces him that he should take her home and make her into his instant girlfriend. And they have a very unusual relationship from that point on. I think that'd be the best way to set it up. And that it did very well. It played, I think it was like 67 film festivals, and we won 48 awards. We got picked up for distribution. You can see it on Tubi and Amazon and Vudu and Google Play, everything else. And I'm working on some new projects now that I'm trying to get off the ground, hoping. I would love to get something, because we were again talking about the legacy of society, and I was noticing, because again, I like all these old, classic foreign language films and stuff like that, international films, and I saw that Society in October was screening on the Criterion Channel
Oh,
for
right. That's
the
right.
anniversary of great horror films from the 80s and stuff like that. So now I've been on Criterion as an actor. Now I want to get a film as a writer director on the Criterion. So that's my next ambition.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I can certainly see that happening. Yeah, I that's so awesome that Dirty Beautiful you said is widely available like VOD. You said it's on Tubi, Amazon, like that will I'll definitely link in the description more information about that. Is so it's probably early days for some of these other projects, right? That you can't really say too much
Yeah,
about it at this stage.
they're just going out to the world right now. So yeah, I can't divulge everything at this point, but they're always. I mean, I try to anything I do, I try to make something interesting. I don't want to make a cookie cutter, film. So anything I'm going for is a little. It's like if this is center, it's a little this way or a little this way. Veers a little bit. So Dirty Beautiful is an interesting little film. I think the stuff I have in developing now is going to be will be. We'll see. It takes a while, as you know, to get films made and stuff like that. But I hope in the next couple of years I'll have something else coming out for people to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, all right. So I know your character dies, but so like say there was a way to bring you back and like a cameo for like a sequel, a series, anything,
Sure.
would you be down to do that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it was fun. I mean, even though I talked about how difficult it was, I mean, I still do have fond memories of the film. I mean, it was a good group of people to work with, and it was I was young and having fun, and I mean, I said earlier, so I should probably now I'm going to contradict myself because if there was another shunting, I couldn't really turn that down. I just have to hope my voice holds out now 30 years later. That's all.
See, I could see you being like one of like someone on the other side of that maybe this time around.
That would make more sense at my age range now and stuff like that, and that would be a lot more fun actually than
Yeah.
to be the
Um,
shunter as opposed to the shuntee. I think I would prefer that. Yeah.
I mean, listen, you could be the judge this time. You could be doing the prodding and you have a very distinguished look. I think you could pull it off.
Oh, I appreciate that. Well, I mean, mostly focus on writing and directing at this point, but I would not turn it down. It'd be fun. It'd be fun to revisit the world of society.
Yeah, well, that's great. This has been a blast. It's really fun because I know we've known each other for it seems like forever now. So it's kind of
Right.
great to actually like get to catch up and talk about this amazing film. And yeah, you're right. It's so funny. Like just maybe like a week ago, there was a up and coming filmmaker that was like posting during Halloween time that Society was like one of their favorite movies, and they watch it like every year around Halloween. So I mean, that's like pretty awesome that still again resonates with a lot of people.
Yeah, it really is. It's I'm happy for the film, and I'm it's fun for me. Again, I haven't really acted much in recent years, but back in the day, I did a lot of different parts, and the only things that really have remained, somewhat. In the public consciousness, mainly Society. I played a kid in Meatballs too, whose braces get stuck with kissing a girl. That one still some people in my age range remember pretty well. But it's nice, because you don't really realize this until you've lived a little while. But really, everything is somewhat ephemeral. It's just everything is whether it's a hit in its day or whatever it is. There all throughout. I'm a student of all film history, and there are huge films that were big films in their day that are now all but forgotten, decades later. Now, this is a film that, as you mentioned, has actually gained a cult following over the last 3 decades. So it's a pretty cool thing to be involved with.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I think that's a great kind of note to go off on. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to sit and talk to me about this really awesome film that you were a part of.
It's my pleasure, Mike. Thanks for talking with me. It was great.
Yeah.